I am introducing Lauren Morimoto. She is the Director of Diversity and Inclusive Excellence and Associated Professor of Kinesiology. She teaches sport history, sports sociology, biomechanics, and ethics and equity in coaching. Her research ranges from sports in Hawaii during the plantations era to the experiences of students of color on predominantly white universities to media constructs of fatness. Through her teaching, research, and inclusion work, she aims to dismantle stigma and prejudice and to encourage resistance against all forms of oppression. So, let's welcome her.
Okay. Hello? Yes, okay, just not holding it close on. So one, I want to thank Alvin for inviting me once again to speak to this class. I've always enjoyed it, and every time I seem to start with, I'm not quite sure why Alvin asked me to do it, because I'm sort of a grumpy person, and I don't have a lot of faith often in the leadership here on this campus. And so when I saw this chapter on the relational model, I was reading and I'm like, is he kidding me? How am I going to talk about this and make it seem real and make it relevant and show that it can work? And then I thought, well, maybe, it's the universe dropping in my hand so I can examine my own leadership and some of the faults I have and some of the ways that maybe I'm not as relational, as inclusive, and as empowering as I could be. And that's why the title is here, because sometimes I create a false dichotomy between progress and process. And so one of the things that often frustrates me with the relational model is I feel like we go on and on and on about things. And you may have felt that yourself, that you're in this meeting trying to get consensus and you're thinking, we need to make something happen. And then what happens for me, and Alvin has been enough with meetings with me to know, is that I bite my tongue and I'm holding it in, and then I finally explode and say something really obnoxious and inappropriate, which doesn't help the situation at all. So I'm assuming this is why, this chapter has been given to me, so I can look a little bit at myself and maybe through that help you see the benefits and the strength of trying to adopt a relational model. So if leadership is in fact relational, switching here, then process becomes as important as outcome. And that's really hard for me to manage sometimes, because I want to get shit done, right? And so sometimes when we're just talking about process, you're thinking, really, I've heard everybody's feelings, I know what everybody needs, can we just make something happen? And part of the problem with that attitude is that if people aren't on board, it's not going to happen. Or if you've disempowered people, you lose a lot of the very people that you're trying to engage. The second is that people are as important as process and purpose. And once again, that's another thing I struggle with, because most of the time I'm thinking, I really don't care if I hurt your feelings. Sorry, I just don't. And once again, that's not really productive, because you're not empowering the people you work with, and you're not giving them the space to feel that they can make a mistake or they can share what they think and that sort of thing. And last is purpose is driven by a shared vision, and I think that's absolutely critical. Now the problem is, and you may have encountered this in your own organizations or here at the university if you're involved with a student club or you're in student government, is that we all often don't have a shared vision. What my idea of the good university isn't the same as what everybody else's idea of the good university is. My idea of inclusion isn't the same, right? My beliefs about what we need to do to move forward are quite different. And so when you have that difference, it can be hard to develop a shared vision. So the relational model is really so dependent on how you interact with people that in some ways it can seem like that takes all your energy than the actual leading or doing of things. So I know that sounds like I'm kind of dumping on this model a little bit, but I actually do think that there are ways that this is a good model to work with, that it does allow people to develop rather than just anointing a leader and letting them take the ball and run with it. So the thing that helped me kind of get my brain around this is to remember the relational model is aspirational, it's not descriptive. So it's an idea that we should be striving for, but it's certainly not a description of how most leadership happens. It's probably actually a quite rare description of how leadership happens. So once I kind of put that in my brain, I thought, okay, I can talk about this as something to move to. That's something that we can all try to aspire to, but recognizing that we're not quite there yet. But also within this model, to be aware that even within this relational, empowering, inclusive model, people get left out. People still feel marginalized, they feel not heard. And so it's not the end-all be-all for how to lead and to get everyone on board, it's just one model. And I'm going to talk more about my experiences because I think that highlights it a little better than kind of reading through the model. So you read the chapter, but just in case you didn't, I just thought I'd quickly hit the key points, and I'm not going to read through this all, but the empowering piece, what does it mean to empower people? To let them develop their leadership capacity, to let them find their voice, to give them the freedom to act, to let them know they can make mistakes. Apparently I was playing with the animations. Inclusive is so you're looking and involving different views, but also different styles of communication. And I'll say for me personally, that's one of the things I struggle with here at the university, and some of you may have had that issue as well. I'm from the lower middle class, working class girl. I speak very directly. And the way that often gets interpreted, for instance, at faculty meetings or at the Senate, academic Senate, is that's just mean. You know, Lauren's mean. I'm like, am I mean? Maybe. But I don't think saying things as they are is necessarily mean. Could I sometimes phrase things better? No doubt. But I think that we need to also be more open to different styles. That if someone's saying, hey, that doesn't make sense to me, they're not saying, hey, you're an idiot. They're saying, hey, that doesn't make sense to me. It's not necessarily a slam on you as a person. And also to accept different views. And you know, one of the things as a teacher I try to do is make sure that all views feel they can be expressed. That doesn't mean I don't express my view. I think, you know, you don't become a director of diversity because you voted for Trump, right? So I think it's pretty clear where my politics lie. But I think if you talk to my students, they'll agree that there's room for every voice and every kind of persuasion, every kind of take on things. And then last, there's these aspects of individuality that you want to really let people be themselves and not have to tamp down those things. So if you look at surveys, for instance, of people of color in industry, and this was done, which magazine? Wall Street Journal in 2014, where something like 57% of the people of color said they felt they had to change some aspect of themselves to fit into the culture in order to feel that they were accepted. And so if you're a leader, you don't want that because you lose valuable talent, voice, ability, vision, and all those sorts of things. Empowering, okay. Ethical, I know you talk about these things. That's why I'm not saying they're not important. I just know you've read the chapter and you talk about them probably ad nauseum. So this higher purpose of wanting to do something for more than just yourself, I believe everyone in here has that because you wouldn't be here otherwise. That's not to say there isn't some self-interest. You have to be an idiot not to have some self-interest. But I think that I believe you all start from a point of wanting something better for everybody, not just yourselves. So I think it's just continuing to cultivate that sense. So how you go through the process of recruiting members, keeping members, encouraging members, all this is part of this relational model of leadership. That these things matter as much as what decisions you're making, what words you're saying, who you're involving, all those things. It's about the process of just everyone feel involved. And so one of the things I'd like you to do, thinking just right now in your chair, if you're part of a group, a class, you lead a class discussion, you're in student government, you run a club, what are 2 or 3 things that you know you've done that might have felt not inclusive to people? And it's usually not the big things. It's not usually like you walked in with like a shirt saying, you know, send the Japs back to internment camps. You know, that's not how it works. It's usually more subtle than that. So if you think of 2 or 3 things that maybe you've done that haven't been so inclusive, then I'll ask if anyone feels they want to share. I don't want to call on anyone because people might not feel comfortable. But does anyone want to volunteer or share something they've done where know they've been not inclusive, not intentionally, but just maybe by being a certain way, talking a certain way, you haven't been inclusive. Oh, okay, baseball cap. Name, I'm sorry.
Just like using like the term like, oh, it's a sorority thing, or oh, it's a Greek life thing, just things like that that mean people who aren't involved when they're studying other terminology instead of just explaining it, just saying, just writing it off, saying, oh, it's just a sorority thing.
Okay, so she was saying sometimes when there's certain terms, people just go, it's a sorority thing, and not taking the time to explain. So you're sitting there going like, I don't know what the conversation's about. Great, thank you. Anybody else done something where you can recall that maybe what you did would have been not inclusive? If you think of one, you can interrupt me. So the article goes on to talk about head, heart, and practice. I think they use different terminology, but I didn't like it, so I use head, heart, and practice, which is another alternative they give. And this is the idea of knowledge. You have to know yourself. You have to know the people around you. So knowing yourself. So this is me in like 4 seconds. Right? That's only a very small part of me. So you know you have all those layers yourself, and the people around you have those layers too. So when you're interacting, it's being aware of those things. That, yeah, you can be a Raider fan and a Hello Kitty fan. These things are not mutually exclusive. You can like hip-hop, and you can also like 70s bad pop, like the Bay City Rollers, which is what I was listening to on the way in. If you don't know who they are, ask your parents. They'll tell you they're huge. So we all have these contradictions, these differences, these layers that are important to acknowledge. If we want people to acknowledge them in ourselves, we of course are going to have to acknowledge them in other people. The second part is about embracing difference. And what does that mean? And what does it mean to confront behavior, to be authentic? And that's one of the things that I think is actually most challenging in a group setting or a leadership setting. To say what you mean and mean what you say, and to stand by what you say and empower others to do the same. So when we're thinking of leadership, it's important to remember that this on the surface might look okay. And this is me. I'm always doing this, except you could put it in meetings. In meetings, I'm listening to the chair of the meeting and going, right? But that is just as dysfunctional as this. Okay? And so sometimes we forget that because on the surface, it seems like, oh, we all get along, everything's great. But that's just as detrimental to leadership, to action, to progress, to process as, me screaming down somebody, which is problematic as well. And last is that we have to do or act. And the word that I like to use, that was somewhere in this text, is practice. That we have to practice, you've heard the saying, practice what you preach, but it's a little bit more than that. It's about cultivating these ways of being in the world that are going to let you lead and help others work with you, so that you practice being a listener. You practice building coalitions. It doesn't, we don't come out of the womb able to do these things. Some people's personalities are more attuned maybe to, let's say, coalition building, but most of us learn how to do it. We don't just have that automatically. And so the thing to remember, there's nothing more on the slide because I couldn't think of any picture, but it's one thing to know things and to feel things and be aware, but if you don't do anything about it, it's pretty damn worthless. So part of the process of being a leader is learning how to bring those three things together: heart, mind, action. These are not separate entities. They're intrinsically connected. And if we all act with a combination of heart and mind most of the time. So those are the things that we want to be aware of. Where are we coming from? Where are other people coming from? So I'll talk a little bit about myself as a leader, and maybe this will help illustrate some of the things I've observed. So the first thing is in the relational model, the things that kind of bind us are the spaces between us. So we're connected, and our relationships exist in the space between. I don't know exactly what that means, but I kind of do, which is that it's hard to figure out, that we're not quite sure what's in that middle area. It's very easy to say, my title is this, and my relationship to this person is this. It's another to really look at the space and go, how are we interacting? What are we about? How are we making sense of things? And that is a task. to have to work on all the time. So when you work with different groups on campus, I'm finding that's one thing. The spaces in between are different. When I'm dealing with upper administration, the space might be like this. When I'm dealing with somebody I'm familiar with, even though they're upper administration, it might be more like this. And other times, there isn't a space at all. And so figuring out where that space is and how to be in that space is important. Of course, relational leadership is a web, and we all know, how strong a web can be. We also know how fragile a web can be. So when you think about building this, it's much easier in some way to set up a hierarchy, right? Steps are kind of sturdy. And setting up a web is more of a challenge. How do you make that work? What makes sense? How do you relate to the people around you? So as an example of a web, I give you the organizational chart for the Academic Affairs Division here at our campus. And as you look at it, what can you make of it? What kind of leadership model do you think the university is adopting when they have this kind of an organizational chart? I know you're at the beginning of the book, but does it seem relational, hierarchical for social change? I heard hierarchical. Other things you notice about this chart. So this is where I exist. My job, I think I'm over here. Here I am, connected to this line, which is connected to this line, which is connected to what? I have no clue. I mean, this was my old setting. So it's hierarchical. Any other things you notice? Does it make sense to anybody? Do you know who's in charge? I hear it. I hear murmurings. Provost is in charge. And beyond that, it's like, okay, then there are the deans, then there are these other people. Where do I fit? Where am I in the power structure, do you think? Who do I report to? Yeah, so you kind of would think the dean, because there's a line that goes through me and through them, but I don't. I actually report to the provost for what that's worth. But this is a typical organizational chart. And if you're trying to do relational leadership, we sort of have these structures in place that don't really work with that so much. So if we go to our so our university does this stuff all the time. So then we have a new president, so we rework our organizational charts. So now this is my new improved organizational chart. Which is somewhat of an improvement, I suppose. That's, I don't know, more clumpy. This is more jellyfishy. And I'm up here now. Woo! But what's interesting is the chart changed, and I didn't know. Has my relationship people, which people changed? No. So it makes me think, hey, are they plotting to bring somebody else in? Because that's kind of high up there. And I certainly haven't felt like that. My position's up there. I really don't have a clue. And I'm also quite not sure of my relationship anymore to other things. So it's really strange. So you're in this kind of web and this fancy web of things, and I'm not sure the relationships, even formally, that I have with other people on this campus. I mean, it kind of looks like now I'm out here on my own. Me and the director of sustainability having our own little world, apparently. But that's not the reality of it. That's not at all how it functions. I'm sort of connected to all these other people. So when you look at structures like this, think about, does this help us get to that relational model or not? And so one of the problems with this is I report, I'll be honest, to a provost who doesn't ever talk to me. Right? So and I kind of like it that way, I'll be honest. The old provost was just like, here's your budget, go away. And I'm like, okay, I can do this. I'll take my money and I'll run and I'll go do whatever I want. And he never bothered me, and I dug it, right? And now I have this sort of interim provost, and I'm not quite sure what she's about. But she hasn't talked to me either, and she's allegedly my boss. So I'm kind of, well, that's interesting. And so I just keep doing my own little thing, spinning around. And I think, well, what do I want from a leader? And I don't know. Because certainly as somebody who's a leader myself, I could go to the person and say, hey, here's what I need. But then part of my fear is always, if they know what I do, then they're going to stop me. And that's been proven true in some cases. So I just kind of keep on the hamster wheel. But it's a very interesting model to not have anyone leading. Conversely, I'm in a school where our dean is like micro-managing us, so every decision, and that's not relational either. And I think she would be surprised to hear that I don't feel like it's relational leadership, because she would tell you, no, I have good relationships, I try to connect, I try to make everyone feel empowered. I'm like, whoa, I hate to break the news to you, but that ain't what's happening, you know? And so part of the problem is when you're trying to do relational leadership, there has to be some give on your part. You have to really want to listen. You can't go to people, oh, I'm going to listen to you. We're going to do these school meetings, and everybody, we're going to listen to you. And then nothing changes. That doesn't empower people. That's not leadership. That's pandering, frankly. And so you have all these different kinds of ways to lead, but the relational model is difficult. It is difficult, and but if you want to really know what's going on at the bottom line with people, that's the way you have to kind of go about it. If you think about both of these models, you'll notice they don't really show how people are connected to each other. And most of us don't work in a vacuum. Are you up there now, Alvin?
Yes.
Yes, Alvin is. Okay, so he's over on the side now. This is Alvin. Right. In the old model, where's Alvin? Bottom right. Oh, transitional program. Oh, shite. Okay. Right. So transitional programs. So, once again, these changes are made, but there's not really consultation with the people below. Right? There's not a conversation with, hey, does it make sense for you to be reporting to this person? Does it make sense? I mean, I don't know. Did they ask you? Not really, yeah. We're just going to move the pieces around and make a new chart. And nobody asked me. I mean, like, I didn't even know about it until I went to look for this chart for y'all. I mean, truly, I'm not exaggerating. So it's this kind of weird relational model where you need to communicate if this is going to work for us. So, and that's, like I said, so going from that, but to my own kind of style, like I said, that maybe this is something for me to question, is how do I lead? And my leadership's pretty scattershot, I have to admit. Like sometimes I'm okay kind of taking the lead position. Sometimes I try to stand back. Most of the time as a leader, I just feel like I'm a pest, honestly. And maybe that is part of it that isn't within this model, but that you build relationships with people so you can ask them for the things you need. And I don't know, I don't know how effective that is. I don't know if that makes them see me as less of a leader and more of a subordinate, but it's what has worked for me. So I have relationships, if you look at this chart, with all the deans. I have relationships with the AVP of academic programs. I pretty much have relationships with everybody but my boss. And that's because those folks have been willing to work with me to kind of create a web to serve students. So they give me the money to do some programming, to do some training, to bring like a Know Your Rights workshop to camp, those sorts of things. And they've been critical to me being able to lead as a diversity person on this campus. But it's a challenge within this system. So a few years ago, somebody printed this organizational chart as sort of a satirical thing of looking at, because everyone's looking now at these tech companies and going, wow, these tech companies do things differently and they're so effective and they get things done and they move quickly and all this sort of thing. But as you look at these, what's the one chart that stands out amongst these? Yes? Microsoft. And so you have Microsoft. So in this satirical drawing, how's Microsoft organized? How many divisions are there? 3 divisions, and they're all pointing guns at each other. And that's frankly a lot of the times how things feel in organizations. You have this group fighting for resources, this group, and that sort of thing. And so at Microsoft, when this drawing came out, had just announced a change, that they were going to move more to a model like Google or Apple, which is to have somebody overseeing things, but not having these separate divisions competing against each other. Because what they found out at Microsoft is that people would actually try to develop things that didn't rely on other people in other divisions, because then it felt like, oh, we have to have a relationship with them, and then we're dependent on them. And so they would actively go outside that. And so this is an example of when you have this leadership which isn't really truly relational, where you're forcing people to work together, but it's dysfunctional and it's not working. So I'm not saying that these are accurate depictions of these groups, but you can see the Apple structure is different from this structure, right? The Apple structure is known more for radiating from the center and then distributing tasks and going outward. And is that a better relational model for what they do? So it kind of started at the bigger point, but I said I would look at myself and kind of share a little bit of kind of my leadership style and maybe where I fall down on this, this relational model. So one of the things is I'm the chair of the Academic Advisory Council, and we're supposed to do oversight for intercollegiate athletics. And one of my frustrations is that we don't really do a whole heck of a lot. And that's historically what's happened. And the problem with the way I've run it is, instead of kind of getting other people on board, I've set the agenda. So this chapter's talked about, no, don't set the agenda, don't kind of try to get everything done, don't roll over people. And that's definitely something I unfortunately have done. On the plus side, I've gotten things done. And so there's research that shows sometimes a task-oriented leadership does accomplish more, it's more productive, but it causes lower self-esteem amongst the people that you work with. So that's a trade-off. So I'm not saying this is the only model to go with, but if you go with task orientation, then you have to know, who am I silencing? Who's getting left out of the conversation? What am I doing that alienates? What am I doing that excludes? And so with the Athletic Advisory Council, pretty much if you don't talk quickly, I cut you off, right? And that's not good, because some people need time to process, right? And you might be one of these. One of my good friends is that you say something and they need about 3 minutes to process, and then they can come back with a really intelligent thing to say. It's not going to be right on the moment. So when I rush an agenda, I'm not getting the best out of people because I'm not giving them a chance to respond. The other thing I'm really not very good about the agenda is getting input before a meeting. So if you're in an organization, you need to check with the members and find out what they want to do. And that seems so mundane, but you'd be surprised how many times, like in my department meetings, we don't get checked on the agenda. And I look on the agenda, I'm like, why the hell are we talking about this? We've talked about it 40 times already. Why is it here again? Or why are we talking about we're not going to solve it? And once again, so we don't have that sort of leadership that's figuring out what has to happen, how do we move us forward to accommodate people's feelings, but then say we've got to move on at a certain point. Most of the meetings I run are run on vote. And it seems like a fair way to do things, right? We're, a republic, which is a form of democracy, so the majority rules. And yet, when you do things that way, you always have people, not always, but you're often going to have people who are unhappy with a situation. And how do you work around that? So the consensus model that they talk about in this chapter is more, you discuss, you ask people what their opinions are, what are their objections, can they, how much time are you going to agree to discuss this? And so when I was working with Laurel Holmstrom Kais to develop the Safe Zone training for LGBT plus students and faculty and staff, she ran meetings with a consensus model. And I have to admit, at first it made me completely nuts, right? Because it's like, all right, how long do we want to spend on this? And I'm like, we're spending 4 minutes talking about how long we want to spend on this topic. But after a couple of years, I came to see she really ran a good meeting, because we did take that time to figure out what are the priorities of discussion, how long do we want to take on it, if we're extending over the time, do we consult with each other? And we developed this training that I think is actually really good because of that, because she asked for feedback, she listened, and it was a process-driven organization instead of a vote-driven. Because had she taken votes, we might have made decisions, but people who felt like that wasn't right or that they wanted to have something else incorporated would have been left out. And in the consensus model, you decide. If you're in the minority opinion, you say, I'm sorry, I can't live with that, so I can't go forward with this action. Or you say, I disagree, but I can move forward, but everyone at least gets heard and their position is no. Like I said, I think it takes skill to run a meeting that way. It's much easier to say, everybody vote, let's cut it, boom, done. And to really cultivate that sort of discussion, but not let it become the thing itself, is a talent. Like I said, it took me a while to get used to it, but being in that, I saw how this could work when it's done well, and that you end up with a better product. The training, which is more interactive, which we've actually tested on people before we started it on the campus. So I think that there are ways, like I said, that you can cultivate the skills where you listen, acknowledge, move on. And I'm struggling with that. And so part of the piece with it being authentic, so going back a little bit, when we say, confront behavior or be authentic, one of the things is, Alvin and I were just in a meeting for the graduate initiative group, and I don't know what the hell we were talking about because we talk about the same thing every damn time. But we're talking, and at some point, your student leader, who I actually think is a great student president, spoke up and said, I'm listening to students, and I'm hearing from students of color that they don't feel really welcome on this campus. Right? Now, this is not news, or I hope it's not news, but it's not news. It's something that's been reported for several years. I've been here since 2009. The things that students of color have asked for is to require faculty to get some kind of cultural competence training, that we hire more faculty of color, that we try to do some programming that's more inclusive. And so every year or month we have these discussions, and your student leader is explaining this, and the administrators are telling her, I'm not quite sure what you're saying. I need to know more. And so I, of course, got snarky, which isn't good. I lost my temper. And I said, what she's saying is this, they want more brown people on campus. I mean, what is so damn hard to understand about that? They want to see themselves in the curriculum. All these things. Now, the problem with speaking that way is my message gets lost. It's not an appropriate way. If I want people to really understand how isolated students feel, how they feel having faculty of color would help, I was trying to explain to the people there, you don't know, as a faculty of color, I advise a lot of students of color who aren't even in my department because they feel they can come to me, but also because I'm from the working class, the way I speak feels comfortable. I don't talk around things, I'm pretty direct. And what a burden that puts on your faculty and staff of color when you don't hire more of us. Blah, 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 blah. Anyway, I went off for about 5 minutes, and I think it wasn't productive. And as somebody who fancies herself a leader on this campus with these issues, I keep replaying, how can I do these things better so that I can get people to buy into that vision, so that I can empower people to say, I get what you're saying, tell me how I can help, right? I'm the AVP of the academic programs, tell me what you need. I'm the Dean of the School of Science and Tech, tell me what steps you would like me to take. But instead, when you do this kind of, vomit on people, that all they do is they recoil from you a little bit, and all that gets out is your feelings and not the action. And so as a leader, one, you can create a setting where people feel they can speak before that happens, but as a leader, when you're speaking, you can try to avoid how you deliver the message in ways that are alienating, that causes the message to get lost within the dialogue. And unfortunately or fortunately, I have a little bit of a reputation for that, of going into meetings and then finally just kind of losing my temper a little bit and then putting things way too bluntly. And as somebody trying to push for diversity and inclusion, I'm not serving the students well or that position well by not being able to be more relational in my leadership. So then what I do is I just go find somebody I can work with and say, give me some money so I can go do this thing, and then I go do it. And that's not really effective either. I mean, it then depends so much on the individuals that are here that it's not really working for the institution at large. So, like I said, so I find it hard to talk about this model because in my experience, most groups don't run like this. Most groups run in a hierarchical manner. Most groups seem to have somebody who sets the agenda, pushes forward. A lot of folks there's power in fighting. There's that dysfunction of not speaking your mind, of everyone wanting to be civil. Right? And so in being civil, we don't say anything of meaning or significance. And so my challenge, and I guess the challenge for you as I've ranted, is there a way to make this model work? And I've given you one example of how I've seen it work with a safe zone, but are there other ways that we can make this work? Because in the end, we do want to take advantage of people's talents and voices and skills. And when you're not using this model, we're not doing that. And so like I said, I think there's a lot in this model that is really helpful. But the development of the skill is a separate piece, and I think that's what this class is trying to do. It's to give you kind of the knowledge about yourself, to figure out who you are, what you value, how you interact with people, to help you become aware of other folks, to have the courage to act, and then do your leadership within this model. That isn't to say at times you're not going to use other models, that you're not going to be task-oriented, but that for the larger health of an organization, that this perhaps is the better model. And so, I said, my kind of last note on this is leadership is, as you know from kind of seeing leadership in action, is something that happens on multiple levels. So it's within your organization with the individual members, but it's also with the leadership, the official people, the people of power that's kind of formal and official. The challenge, I think, is as you empower the people that are within your organization, not to feel threatened or lost, but to instead view that as a kind of magnification of your own leadership. And to feel like this is what I want. I want people who disagree with me. I want strong personalities below me because this is what makes things better. So in the end, like I said, I know I'm not given a ringing endorsement of this model. I think it would be great if everybody led this way, but I think it's really, in terms of this institution, it's going to be your generation that actually maybe is able to change it, because we're still too much in the remnants of the old way, and we're trying to learn this new way, but I think it's a little bit of a struggle, as you can hear, for me, to make it work. So I hope that as you read the book that I haven't dissuaded you too much from it, because I think it does have value, but like I said, I think it's an incredibly difficult, challenging way to lead, but it does pay dividends in the end. So I'll leave it at that, and there. So the way I see it within this model summed up is this is what your task is. And this is what my task is, and I'm kind of failing at it, obviously. It's to be aware of relationships and patterns of collaboration. That I'm actually pretty good at. But to see, sense, and affirm what's happening and build on what's already happening, not feel that you have to do it yourself or that you have to reinvent the wheel, but to really be attuned to what's going on. How can I build on the work my colleagues in this class are already doing? How can I build on what the peer mentors have done? And that, to me, in a nutshell, is what this model is about. This is your task. And it sounds so simple, but it's not simple. It takes a commitment, and it takes a commitment to continue to process, to question yourself, and to reflect. And frankly, that's hard. And it takes time. And I hope that through this course that you get the tools to kind of be able to do this thing that this model asks of you. So I will leave it with that, with any questions. Any questions? Okay, I see, in the middle.
Have you shown kind accountability for your own mistakes and leadership position?
Oh, translate for me?
I can't hear. Can you speak a little louder? We couldn't hear you up here, sorry.
How do you show accountability for your own mistakes and a leadership position?
Oh, that's a great question. How do you show accountability for your own mistakes? I have to say, but I'm old, and it came with age, that I just apologize now. And I apologize all over the damn place, So like after my last little outburst in a meeting, I had to tell people, I'm sorry, I was an asshole. And I just get frustrated. And that's not excusing it. But I think accountability is saying, I made an error, I made a mistake, and just being able to share that with the people and not trying to put it off on somebody else. So often I'll see leaders try to throw somebody else under the bus, to be like, oh, well, it was Lauren, she decided to run with an idea, and I didn't give her the okay, but she ran with it. And I'm like, huh? And so I think being able to own up to that and to apologize sincerely individually to the people and to the group, I think is really important. And it's a sign of a leader who has a certain amount of confidence, because it's hard to face peers. One of the hardest things to do is face peers and say, I screwed up, or I did something that I thought was in our best interest and I turned out to be wrong. But I think that accountability builds trust, and it's transparent, and it helps people feel that they can call on you without you relying on the committee or the individuals in it to get yourself out of a mess. So I think it's not much of an answer, but that's it. And I couldn't do it till I was older. I never admitted I was wrong until I was like 30, because I thought I had to have it all in order and I had to be perfect, and if I wasn't perfect, people were going to slam me. And now I'm like, if they're going to slam me, oh well. It's going to happen. So I wish it could come before. It didn't take age, but in my case it took age. I think it can come earlier. Alvin's significantly younger than me, and he's capable of doing it. So it makes me hopeful that, it's not an age thing, but a cultivated thing. Other questions? All right. Well, thank you so much. Good luck.